audience, we already started to chat about the topic of the seminar, which is the Baltic Sea. And I welcome you all to this session, and which is organized by the John Nurminen Foundation and Race for the Baltic. I am Maria Wetterstrand. I will be the moderator for this session, and I have a background in Swedish politics. I've been engaged working with environmental issues for maybe 30 years or something like that, and in politics, and also with during the last 10 years I worked a lot with the business sector to try to get them more engaged in issues connected to sustainability. And now I work in Brussels as a consultant, and I have the huge honor to be the moderator of this session, where we will talk about the importance of partnerships and common goals for the Baltic Sea. And today is the Baltic Sea Day, so that's the reason why there are seminars connected to the Baltics just this day. And we'll talk a little bit also about what the biggest challenges and problems for the Baltic Sea is today. How can we save the Baltic or decrease the negative impacts on the Baltic and increase the positive impacts? Talk a little bit about eutrophication, what can be done about it, and why is it such a huge problem for the Baltics, and also about how different actors can work together in a better way. I mean, the Baltic Sea has been on the agenda for decades, and some things has improved, that's for sure, but there are also quite a lot of things that have not improved as much as we would like them to. So it is a challenge to make the Baltic Sea a kind of model sea for action, and that can be used maybe also as a model for other seas around the world that are in the same situation. So we will discuss these topics with actors from different places. We have Peter Viven Nilsson from Race for the Baltic. We will have Anna-Maria Arakoski-Engart from the John Nurminen Foundation, and we will also have Joakim Lindholm from Caverion and Kai Mykinen from the Finnish Coalition Party. So there will be representatives from different sectors, which I think is super interesting. And we will start with a small exercise where we want you also to get engaged. And this challenge for you now is to go to the website menti.com on your phone or on your computer and use the code, which is 39822146. And I think you can see it. Yeah, you see it also on the screen. And your mission is to pin your location on the map. It's the first step, and then you will get the other question a bit later. Maybe you can find it on your, I will give you just a few minutes to make the exercise. I would try to do it myself as well. 39822146. And then how do I find Eskilstuna on this huge map? It seems that most people are close to the Baltic, but not everyone. We have one person at least from India, it seems, and 3 persons. It's a little bit difficult to see exactly where they are, but it's somewhere around where I usually live in Brussels, and then quite a lot of people around the Baltic region. So we can imagine that some of the people in the audience, they know a bit about the Baltics at least. We have someone is in the north of the western part of Russia, and Yeah, it seems that at least a few persons come, or at least are right now somewhere else than around the Baltics. So let's move on to the next question. You can, you will get it automatically in Menti. So what does the Baltic Sea mean to you? And you can give a few different words and we will see them as a kind of word cloud here on our screen. It's beautiful. It seems that it's more positive words than the negative ones. We have one eutrophication and endangered, but also a lot of beauty and summer and harmony and swimming and travel and peacefulness. Well, that's a wonderful word cloud to start off this seminar. So, kayaking, cod fishing, business and collaboration. Yes, that's beautiful. So thanks a lot for that one. And I think that many people here in the audience have quite a close to the heart relationship to the Baltic Sea. And actually, I will ask the same question now to our panelists. So let's start with you, Peter, from Race for the Baltic. What would you answer to this question?
Well, for me, the Baltic Sea really is the core of vacation. It's really like summer vacation. I'm not a vivid fisherman or the sports fisherman or a sailor or diver, so I don't have that relationship. And I actually brought up in a city in the center of Sweden, so inland without access to water. But it was also striking that as soon as summer came, we just couldn't wait to get out of there. So for me, I can't imagine a vacation without going swimming in the Baltic Sea or going on a boat trip or even just looking at the Baltic Sea. So for me, it's really the essence of vacation. So if the Baltic Sea gets any worse, I unfortunately think I will have to go abroad for all vacations, and that I guess wouldn't be good for various other reasons.
Yes, thank you. Kai, I will invite you here. You're from the Kokoomus, the National Coalition Party in Finland. What's your relationship to the Baltic Sea?
Well, thanks, Marianne. I'm actually also chairing the so-called Archipelago Sea group at the Finnish Parliament, which we founded a year ago, where we have participants from all parties in the Finnish Parliament. But why I wanted to establish that group and chair it is, the background is that, well, somehow I feel that it's a very important part of my life here in the coast of Baltic Sea, in Finnish Gulf, and I don't have a long sailing history, but our kids somehow started to practice optimist jolla sailing and are competing in that. And then we have actually started also to sail with larger boats as a family. And that's actually, I can recommend that that's a hugely refreshing way to really cut things from your normal life, to be the 1 or 2 weeks in a boat together and go around. And especially this Archipelago Sea, which is quite unique between Åland and Åbo, basically. It's very beautiful and refreshing with all the small islands and not so dense population around that. But it would be even much more refreshing with less problems with overload of nutrients.
That's for sure. Actually, even though I'm Swedish, my closest connection to the Baltic Sea is from Finland. I spent sometimes in the summer a few days in Kustavi, which is also in the same area as Kai mentioned. Joachim, would you like to give us your view on the Baltics?
Sure thing. Thanks, Maria. Well, from a hobby point of view, I do enjoy kayaking a lot, and we live in close proximity of the shoreline. So being on the shores of the Baltic Sea with my two young boys is of course a great way to spend afternoons or weekends. But from a more of a societal point of view, the Baltic Sea for me is a sort of a, how should I put it, a measure stick for our civilization in a way. How good are we at taking care of something that is of huge importance and is just next to us? How good are we at that? And in a way, the state of the Baltic Sea in a way represents to me our competences and capabilities in that area. So bit of a dualistic point of view of looking at the Baltic Sea, I would say.
Thank you. And then Anna-Marie, what is your view on the Baltics?
I must say that it somehow represents for me nearly my soul landscape, if I may be so poetical, with its beauty and its kind of bad days and bad weathers, or its eutrophication and all that. It also somehow tempts me to my borders, both while I'm swimming or on a boat, meaning in the summer as well as in the winter with the ice. Is this right weather? Shall I go or not? It's somehow it's a fantastic and it's very exciting element and very important element in my life, and it also obviously needs takes a lot of time as well as in my working life as well as in my free time. It's great.
So this was our introduction to the Baltics and also our introduction to our four participants here in the seminar, which we will meet also later in a panel discussion. But what we will do now is we will give the floor to Peter from the Race for the Baltic, and we will look at Baltic Sea and the state of the Baltic Sea and its nature. And I want to just tell the audience that if you have questions that you want us to put to the speakers or bring up in the panel discussion later, you can use the chat here in Zoom. So we will try to pick a few questions from the chat if you add them there. And I will give the floor now to you, Peter. Tell us, what's the state of the Baltic today?
Thank you. I thought we'd just start with a short video clip of kind of showing where are we in the world. So if you just start the video there, zooming in on where we are, where the Baltic Sea is situated, and as you can slowly see, we're located in the very northern hemisphere of the planet, and surrounded by Sweden and Finland to the north, and then Poland to the south. And here we zoom in and we can see this horrible picture of the Baltic Sea and how you see the algae blooms even from satellite from the sky. And if we move on, so the Baltic Sea is widely recognized as one of the world's most polluted seas. And it has the world's largest dead zone that you can see on the lower image here, that now covers an area twice the size of Denmark. So it's the largest dead zone that is caused by man, and it's surrounded by 9 countries, out of which 8 are part of the European Union, and then you have Russia as well surrounding the Baltic Sea. And in 1974, the surrounding countries signed the Helsinki Convention, also known as HELCOM, where they agreed to cooperate and work together on improving the environment of the Baltic Sea. And within HELCOM, if we change slide, so then we've kind of looked, so what are the key problems with the Baltic Sea? And HELCOM has tried to quantify and list what are the main pressures and what is their kind of quantifying their impact on the ecological system. And that's what you can see here, something called Baltic Sea Impact Index. And as you can see, there is one impact that is twice the size of the second one, basically, or even more than that. And that is the nutrient concentrations. if you just press that button, and namely then eutrophication. And those nutrients then are, of course, nitrogen and phosphorus. So that is really the core problem that the Baltic Sea is facing. So if you change slide again. But interestingly enough, and I don't know how well familiar you are with the science behind what's called planetary boundaries. There was actually a session about that just before this one. So this is the science where they've asked the scientists about where are we kind of pushing the boundaries of our planet the most, and on that there you can see climate change, you can see ocean depletion, ocean acidification. But it's interesting to see that the two of the most critical actually boundaries are phosphorus and nitrogen. If you press the button again. So this is not just a problem here in the Baltic Sea, it's actually a global problem that is one of the most pressing for the planet as such. If you press again. But then we then zoom on the Baltic Sea. Here you can see a graph where you on the left side can see the inflow of nitrogen, and on the right side you can see the inflow of phosphorus into the Baltic Sea. So the, I don't know what, yeah, greenish line is the inflow from the river, and with the purple you've added what's coming from the air. And the green line, straight line that goes through both graphs, is what the Baltic Sea can take care of itself. So if we're above that line, we're increasing the concentration, it's getting worse and worse. If we're below the line, it's actually getting better. So a few things that are quite interesting to see here, and one is how it really takes off after the Second World War in 1940-ish. Another thing that's interesting to see is that if you look on this macro scale, you can see that on nitrogen side, we're actually below the line now. So it's on a macro scale, we've come quite far on the nitrogen side. If we then look on the right graph, you see in the phosphorus inflow, and you can see how when HELCOM was founded there in 1974, since then there's been a lot of improvement of phosphorus, and quite tremendous work coming from, in an international perspective, this is quite outstanding, coming from 70,000 tons of inflow per year down to roughly like 26 or 27,000 tons of phosphorus per year. But even though we've done that improvement, we're still above the line. So it's actually still getting worse every year, because we're increasing the concentration of phosphorus every year. But what we remain to do is really close that remaining phosphorus gap. If we manage to close that, and then we start improving the state of the Baltic Sea year by year. So and I think this is the typical struggle you have by explaining you worked so long with this and you've done so much, yet we're not seeing any improvement. But it's very important that we don't stop now, and that we actually continue and make sure that we close that gap, because then we can say whether we turn the tide of the state of the Baltic Sea. I think you can change slides here. So that was just a brief introduction for me on how we view the state of the Baltic Sea.
Thanks a lot. It's at least inspiring to see that all the action that has been taken during the last decades has some kind of effect also on the inflow of phosphorus and nitrogen to the Baltic, and thus probably will have, at least in the long term, some kind of effect on eutrophication, at least not making it worse, which is a starting point, so to say, at least. Yes, so thanks a lot for that, Peter. We will now let Anna-Marie tell us a little bit about why it is important to have a holistic view when you look at the issues connected to the Baltic Sea. So the floor is yours, Anna-Marie.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, in our 30 years work at John Nurminen Foundation, we have realized and come to realize that not all people have actually a clear and a close connection to nature or water or lakes, seas or oceans. They have some other connections that are stronger, and some other things that talk to them stronger. So in order to save seas or save the nature, we also need those people and their help and their understanding. And that's why we have realized it is important to bring up all the sides of the sea that joins us here in the Northern Hemisphere, joins our culture, which is very rich and very old. We have been working together and fighting against each other. We have enjoyed, and this sea is one of our main food supplies. So it is interesting, and it is important to get all the people to join to save the Baltic Sea, understanding it. And sometimes culture or history or arts speak much louder voice than science or the nature itself. And if you have ever listened and read the new UN Ocean Decade material, you come up with the words ocean literacy. And I think it really clearly explains why do we have to listen to the ocean. We have to kind of be quiet and try to get all kinds of information out of the ocean regarding its past and its in order to build up its future. And actually we are building up our future. Humanity needs healthy oceans. And if we go and think about the work we have done, we started actually exactly in this, from that point of view. We wanted to tell the story of the Baltic Sea. We wanted to see and show how the human relationship to the Baltic Sea has entangled in the last hundreds of years. So we have been doing lots of cultural work until the end of 90s, where the blue-green algae were so bad here at the coast of Finland that there were a few summers where you really couldn't swim. So we realized the story of the sea cannot be told if the main character dies. And we strongly started to work in very concrete projects in order to cut and work on the biggest problem, that is eutrophication, as Peter has just shown us. And we have done now 36 projects where we have been able to cut over 2,000 tons of phosphorus going to the sea. We have also projects that are working on the nutrient load that is already in the sea, which is much more difficult and more cost effective. But it all sums up, actually, I want to show you a short video about the beauty of this polluted sea. It's not dead, and it totally has hope. Let's look at a little bit about how it looks like.
Thanks a lot for that beautiful video that can inspire us to work even harder to save the Baltic Sea and increase its health. So now we heard a few perspectives, but we will also bring in the perspective of politics and business, because politics and business play a huge part in saving the Baltic. because business and politics, there is a lot of power in those sectors. We will start with you, Joachim. You work at Caverion. What do you say? How can business work towards sustainable solutions connected to the Baltic Sea?
Thanks for the question, Maria. First of all, I have to say that this kind of a statement, the story cannot be told if the main character dies. I hadn't heard that one before, and it's actually quite beautifully and nicely put. It somehow touches the core of the discussion here today. As Maria said, businesses, we do have a lot of power, and we have to use it wisely. And we have the monetary resources and the intellectual know-how to steer societies and therefore also ecosystems. And we have to be cautious in the way we use those powers we have. We at Caverion, for example, we have operations in the Baltic countries, in the Nordic countries, Germany, Poland, Austria, Norway. So therefore, the Baltic Sea is in the center of our operations at Caverion. But of course, we are not a fishing company or are we a cruise ship manufacturer, even though we're located right at the shores of the Baltic. We work with buildings and the built environment. And of course, our way of impacting and creating a positive handprint is more of the indirect way, I would say, since we, as I said, we work with buildings, and the buildings cause a lot of CO2 emissions. 30% of the Europe's CO2s come from the built environment, and on a global scale, 70% from the built environment. So when we, for example, can make the built environment less, using less energy, that of course will indirectly also assist the Baltic Sea in healing. And well, I see it as such that sort of to, how should I put it? You know the saying that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But the problem with the Baltic Sea is that what happens at the Baltic Sea stays at the Baltic Sea because of the geographical reasons. And as I stated earlier, I see the Baltic Sea as a sort of a civilization yardstick, that how good are we at taking care of what is right in front of us. And that's where we as businesses and Caverion as a real estate business or built environment business, we must understand it, as Anna-Mari said, from a holistic point of view. What can we do alone? Can we do anything alone? How do we need to collaborate with our customers? How customer-centric must we be? How can we better understand the tidal waves of the political landscape? How can we better contribute or collaborate with third sector actors? And I see that we as business, not just Caverion as a corporation, but business by a larger scale, we have a tremendously large opportunity to impact in a positive way. But that of course requires collaboration, and I'm really pleased that we have these kind of panels where we can in a way exchange thoughts and educate each other.
Yes, I think as you that it's very important to have these connections between politics and business and academia and the civil society. So it's super important to have these kinds of talks. So let's bring in the political side of things. Kai, Finland is a kind of front runner when it comes to taking action for the Baltic Sea with the HELCOM initiative, for example, and also, of course, that Finland has a huge coastline, and it's all along the Baltic Sea. So how do you tackle these things politically? It's a long discussion that's been going on for decades.
Well, thank you, first of all, Maria, for a very polite introduction for me as a Finn, because yes, to some extent, of course, and not least, John Nurminen Foundation and other private foundations have been doing very good work, especially when it comes to St. Petersburg and Northwest Russia, where we have managed before this current situation cooperate in a way where actually Russian pollution to the Baltic Sea has been diminished to a small fraction of what it was 25 years ago. And that is actually, one can also see that when you go to the eastern part of Finnish Gulf, that waters are in better shape there than they used to be. But at the same time, I must say that, okay, we have been active in HELCOM and other international forums, but we are also quite guilty here because our own archipelago waters are currently one of the main hotspots. And also it's a fact that if you look the map of phosphorus eutrophication and phosphorus overload to the sea, the Finnish southwest corner is like glowing with red light in the same way as also Denmark has for a certain different reasons, and there is of course certain like geological reasons for this as well. It was the ice age which differentiated this coast, but also the fact that we are still doing wrong things for our large rivers, especially in southwest Finland, where we still produce overload of eutrophication each year, and actually most of that over eutrophication which is seen in our own archipelago sea is coming from Finnish mainland, and there we must do more decisive things. And here actually the reason why I was active in founding the Archipelago Sea Group and why we actually named it Archipelago Sea Group and not Baltic Sea Group is that we must focus much clearer to the real large flows that we have. As long as we put money to all beautiful and nice small voluntary projects from all over the Finland, and as long as a farmer gets same subsidies in inland and coastland, and was it relevant or not place for the Baltic Sea, we can't get where we want. But we need to understand that there is actually half a dozen of large rivers in 50 kilometers from Turku to east and to north, and along those rivers we must identify that okay, there is long history of over phosphorus eutrophication of the river banks in the fields, and we must invest there much more heavy subsidies for those farmers to actually get eutrophication out of the soil, and then we also need to tackle quite geographically limited problem of huge load of phosphorus from animal manure, especially actually chicken and pigs. There is not so more cows in southern Finland anymore, but it's pigs and chicken, and the concentration to same farms is growing, and they have not more field to put the manure than before. So that's you can see in the maps if you look to the phosphorus maps, and that is actually the main engine of bringing the new overload of phosphorus to the system. So that's something where we need to get much better, like biogas production and circular fertilizers, which we've been working to find in incentives well enough, but that's still ongoing work. Then get the overload of eutrophication out of the most relevant places in the fields where the soil is too nutrified. And then actually the third thing is that if we here want to see the real change in the archipelago during our lifetime, we need to get also phosphorus directly out of the sea. So and there is actually quite interesting startups and innovations of how to actually gather things out of the sea directly and to use it to chemical industry and such. So basically, my main claim is that we need to focus to real figures, to the relevant volumes, and actually to concentrate all the subsidies and incentives to those, and less doing of all nice things over Baltic Sea, because then we really don't go where we want. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. I actually saw just a few weeks ago a proposal from the Finnish Ministry of Environment that they wanted to get support in the state budget to invest in circularity of nutrients. So I think that's at least, I think it was incentivized by the problems with the prices of fertilizers. So that might actually push this in a direction of wanting to become more circular. Do you feel that pressure also in politics, that it's become more of a higher up on the agenda, so to say?
Well, a bit mixed feelings, because on the other hand, as you can imagine, that currently when the agricultural farms and the agricultural industry has a real problem of how to actually get even fertilizers and actually how to survive from the costs. So then easily the focus of politics goes to how to get cheaper food with any costs to the sea. So then easily when we negotiate, as I was in the previous government, we negotiated with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Minister of Agriculture, and it was always the different kind of priorities. And then easily in this kind of situation, it would be hard to say that, hey, by the way, we need to also diminish the pollution to the sea and find new incentives when we reform subsidies for farmers, because currently the priority is to just to get the food.
It becomes a little bit more short-term thinking in this kind of crisis situation. Yeah,
definitely. But on the other hand, Maria, I think that looking a bit further, this cost hike of mineral fertilizers, of course, makes things much more easier for farmers to prioritize different solutions and makes it easier than to choose actually circular economy solutions for fertilizers. And actually currently I think that this year we have less fertilizers in the fields because the price has been so high that actually farmers have been prioritizing that they don't even fertilize all of those fields that they used to do a year ago, which might be quite healthy in a sense that better this way than to fertilize too much. It's not easy to do these kind of choices. My father-in-law is also a farmer in Salo region, and we've been discussing about these things weekly over summer, and I understand the difference of the views as well.
Yes, thank you. Anna-Maria, you wanted to comment on that, please.
Yes, thank you, Maria, and thank you, Kai. I'm very, very glad to hear that you still are pushing this very reasonable politics of really concentrating our all efforts, which are, which is important in these very tough times, and there are lots of needs that needs to be taken care of. But I still would like to remind you and perhaps strengthen your idea and also give you, just help you in the negotiations. The thing is, lots of the farmers are actually willing to do their best, their utmost best towards to the environmentally healthy food production. So it's a question of who is against it. I really would in the politics ask that question. And on the other hand, as we have realized in our fishing project here at the John Nurminen Foundation, there are people who still have and are able and willing to pay a little bit more for the sustainably fished wild fish, either fresh or other products. So even in the consumer field, there is this kind of sense of, yes, I am needed and I am able to bring my part of in this whole discussion. And thirdly, I would say it is a big political discussion and needs to be changed that 80% of our agricultural fields are used to grow food for cows. So it is we need a change of our food production as such, because then all these the little money we have, and it's not little as such, can be used, as you said, to the right and big deeds. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a few questions that came from the audience as well. One of the questions was related to Joachim's input here about do you have are there collaborations today between companies with regard to issues in the Baltic Sea?
And now I'm no longer muted. Yeah.
Now you're no longer muted.
Of course, we have various collaborative models with different kind of customers and different kind of companies in the construction and real estate and building facilities industries. Some of our customers are of course located very closely to the Baltic shoreline, and a lot of the especially industrial sites understand their impact on the Baltic Sea. And with those customer connections, we of course have have the structures in place that again indirectly help to reduce the load that the Baltic Sea carries. Yes.
Thank you. And the other question was related to Peter's presentation, I think, about the nutrient inflows chart. There was waterborne input, and then there was total input, and the total input, of course, was a little bit higher than the waterborne input. So what is that input, the difference between those?
Yes, so the total adds the airborne input. So together they actually, because I think they also specify if direct disposition, the positions. So those two actually become the total, and a direct deposition would come in the riverine typically. So you can break it down even further, and then you look at direct sources and indirect sources. So those are covered there as well. So that is the total. And I would like, if I may, I would like to maybe comment a little bit on what Joachim said as well, and maybe also say that I really appreciate the approach that the Kai present with a focus on the big sources, because I think that's something that needs to be reiterated. There's a lot of goodwill out there, but sometimes we have limited amount of resources, and it's important that we kind of focus the resources on the really big streams and where they make the most effort. So I think that's a great thing, and great work that I think John Nurminen really was a forerunner in pushing for that. So I think that's a very, very good aspect. And I think it was interesting what Joachim said with respect to the Baltic Sea, because I think Joachim has a great point in that there is a large amount of the companies actually don't have a direct impact on the Baltic Sea. There are a few industries. It might be the pulp and paper industry, it might be the steel industry, agriculture, of course, fertilizer, and of course fishing industry. But there's a lot of other companies that really don't have that much of an impact. But what I would love to see, and I think that was also covered in the previous session that was with WWF on the planetary boundaries, and why I think that image is quite important is at least if I look from a Swedish perspective, if you're as a company, what you could do, of course, is you can still both donate money, and there was actually a nutrient reduction scheme that where the companies compensated actors that reduce nutrient inputs. But I would say that in Sweden, it's very little focus on the Baltic Sea from companies. From companies, it's typically the consciousness is growing. Everybody's very aware and they want to do good. But if you as a company would dedicate that money to the Baltic Sea, I think you would very soon end up in a question asking, why are you not, for instance, focusing on the climate? I'm not saying that it's not good to focus on the climate, but this is actually the biggest environmental problem we have in our region, and to some extent it's also, you need to kind of dig where you stand, and it becomes, so I would at least like to see more efforts and kind of that you could with a straight face say that you dedicate also a lot of your resources to improve the Baltic Sea. And I think that planetary boundary image actually is a good way of showing that there's nothing bad with focusing on this. This is definitely our biggest problem, and where we can probably have the biggest impact, and it's actually a global problem, so we can have the solutions here and export them to other parts of the world, because this is really a big problem. So that is something I would love to see more of in the company side of the world. Sorry.
Yes, I see, Kai, that you raised your hand, but we would like to show a few pictures. Anna-Marie, I want you to show us a few pictures of projects that you are working on in the John Nurminen Foundation to reduce eutrophication in the Baltics. So then we can give the floor to Kai a little bit later, please.
Thank you, Maria. As mentioned, we have worked on the eutrophication now 20 years with concrete projects. And as Kai reminded, we started our work at St. Petersburg wastewater plant, installing enhanced phosphorus removal equipment and schooling the people, and have been working in the East in 12 other cities doing the same. Nowadays, our projects are more complex, very much on the Finnish and Swedish coastline around the Åland Islands. And I will tell you about coastal reef projects and manual recycling, which Kai actually already was referring to, which are projects where we reduce the eutrophication that is coming, the nutrients that are coming from the land to sea. In the coastal reed project, it is the only one of our project that also has some climate aspect, since those reeds you see in the picture, if they are overgrowing bay and are not taken out of the bay, will kind of leave their phosphorus in the bay, and in that sense make even bigger eutrophication for the next year. If you cut it and leave it in the bay or in the coast, obviously the nutrients will flow into the sea again. If you use it, for example, for as a growing bed for salads or herbs, that is also something that helps the climate, since that reduces the need of peat. You can see that picture is from one of the bays here in west from Helsinki, from Kirkkonummi, that has overgrown already. And there we have been cutting and moving the reed from the waters. That helps maintain biodiversity. Obviously, that is not done in any kind of important areas for birds or flora and fauna as such. It restores landscapes, and as I mentioned, it replaces, the reed can be used to replace peat. Foremost, it is quite interesting. It offers really work for local entrepreneurs that has been formerly working on the peat industry. We have been doing this project already 2 years now, and we have we have both business as well as the government working with us on this project, where we have been able to cut over 1,000 kilos of phosphorus by now. The other project I want to tell you about is the manual recycling. There we want to show that it is possible and not that costly to actually process a manure and move it from those areas where there are loads of animal farming to areas where we in Finland grow wheat or rye, and areas that don't have that much nutrients in the fields yet. So we process the manure and organize the transport, and so we help regional nutrient imbalance from livestock and manure production, and that helps us to cut nutrient runoffs to the waters. It is at the moment not at all economically attractive for the farmers to do that processing. Foremost, the processing is the expensive part, or the transporting and apply the manure. It would be much cheaper to use the mineral fertilizers still. That project could help us all at this moment of the Ukraine or the Russian war, and help Baltic Sea, absolutely.
That's very interesting to see. And you also have to work together with farmers and other actors to put these projects into reality.
That's right. And as our experience is really that there is a total willingness. It's obviously important for the farmers to be totally sure that the production is not suffering, and the microbes in the fields are not suffering. And if all that scientific data is there, as they always are when we start any project, then they are totally, it's easy to start, and it's easy to start business. Business understands numbers. And this could be also for somebody, this could be a business. And this problem, what Kai was explaining of the deviation of agriculturing, it's not only a Finnish problem or a Swedish or a problem of the Baltic Sea. This kind of situation we have all over the globe. So this kind of solutions could be transformed or transported to any other areas. And that's what I like too, that we are not only saving the Baltic Sea, but we are handing over possibilities for others either to copy with pride or to do business of, and thus help us to really to do a greater ocean work.
Yes, thank you. And Kai, mentioning this international cooperation, how much of, I mean, you haven't had this group in the parliament for such a long time, but maybe you are planning to have also international cooperation through this working group?
Well, good point that maybe we should put more efforts to that. The good thing is that we've been pushing forward the government program, which is now on place, where we have actually clear goal of getting rid of the HELCOM hotspot definition for the archipelago sea by 2027, which is very problematic. It's very hard goal. It's very challenging goal, and actually there have been this week in Finnish papers discussion from civil servants that they see it impossible, but this is something we need to push forward. But definitely also in international cooperation, and actually one huge challenge is that how actually HELCOM can work in the future, as Russia is one founding member, but currently basically we are not able to cooperate with that. So that's definitely one important thing. And then of course in the end, as I wanted to raise hand, which is partly linked to Maria's question, that the philosophical broader picture question is that if we looked past 25 years, we have learned to take much more seriously climate change, and we are, in my opinion, doing things which I was dreaming about 15 years ago in Europe when it comes to climate pollution. But at the same time, actually, with Baltic Sea protection, quite little has happened, unfortunately. And this is a bit of a puzzle because, okay, on the other hand, climate change, of course, is more existential for us. But on the other hand, like Finland is only 0.1% of the global CO2 emissions. Realistically, our own efforts can't make a large change. But when it comes to the Baltic Sea, it's really up to us here around the sea to decide what happens for the sea. And this is a bit of a weird for me, that why people are not more interested about the Baltic Sea and ready more to invest to that political efforts, time, money, and so forth. And okay, it's 70% from farming currently, the overload of nutrients. It will take decades to change that, even if we would do all the aggressive things. But actually one comment for Joachim especially, that I'm very glad to see you also as a representative of Caverion in this discussion. And I think that in the future, the urban runoff waters will be more and more important part of the healthiness of the Baltic Sea, especially the coastlines. And we see it already now locally in Espoo and Helsinki region, where we have many urban spaces. And here maybe Caverion could, together with the construction companies and infrastructure planning companies, do more, because I think that we are not yet there to understand that how we can manage the urban runoff waters in a way that they wouldn't serve problems to the sea, when we will have more urban runoffs also because of the climate change and more like harsh weathers. And this is something where I hope that your cluster could do concrete, really do the change, because currently I think that we in the cities, we are not yet doing enough for this thing.
It's a proposal for you here, Joachim. Any comments spontaneously?
I'm really happy that you raised the question, because or the point, like just out of my head here, that should there even be such a thing as a runoff water? Like it's in a way not to be like overly philosophical, but this whole like thematical wording of runoffs and wastes and everything, like are we actually doing a disservice to societies when we in a way accept such things existing? And yes, I fully agree, Kai, that we at Caverion and the construction industry could, and in the future also should, do more to enhance the situation here. Fully agree.
And another question is about the individuals. Maybe people here in the audience, they want to understand what they can do as individuals to actually reduce their ocean footprint, so to say. Do you have any comment on that, Peter?
Sorry, would you repeat the question, Maria?
Yes, if you as an individual want to engage, like in protecting the Baltic, what could be like your actions or your way into this?
Well, I think this is a strong need that the people today really want to see what can they do, and there are definitely things you can do. I mean, one thing is you shouldn't pee in the water when you're there. So pee in a toilet. That's an easy one. Maybe not intuitive to everyone, but that's actually a thing you can do. If you own a horse, you can have some impact by being good at mocking your paddles. If you have a boat, there are things you can do. But to some extent, I also think that a little bit coming back to what Kai said, I think the really big things are to some extent at other places. So, but this is a little bit of a personal reflection. I think to some extent, I don't think always that every single person can be an expert and always know exactly what is the right thing to do. I think you should, there is some extent that you should actually also focus on being a good citizen, pay your taxes and make sure that we get tax money for this, and then read up on the questions that you find interesting, so you then understand what politicians do you think have the right suggestions. So to some extent, I also think there could be an over belief in the change that you can do as an individual on your own acting, but maybe that's a bit controversial. That's my own.
No, but I think
reflection.
it's a wise reflection. I mean, the responsibility from politics and business might be to make it easy for people not to have to think about everything all the time. But then some people will engage because they want to engage, and that can help push politics and business forward and create a market for products that are produced with more responsibility, for example. So,
and of course, you can always donate. I mean, read up and spread the word, and you can donate money to organizations like Nurminen or ourselves or others that do work for the stuff. And typically, I would say that is maybe a better bang for the buck to, I mean, find the right organization that fits your purposes, and then make sure that they use it wisely, rather than you spending a lot of time doing something that maybe not really move the needle.
Anna-Mari, do you agree or disagree?
I totally agree, and I would like to add one thing which was mentioned before, is the diet. If we just manage to get out of the 7 days a week meat to 1 or 2 days a week, I don't even say don't eat meat. I like my meat too. Once in a while, but that makes a big difference, and it's not really, giving up that much. So I would add that to Peter's good list.
Thank you. Let's move. Peter, you have some pictures as well, I think, about cooperation, and let's have a look at that.
Yes, I mean, cooperation is of course a fundamental part, and I think this can be multifaceted. One thing, of course, that we talked about earlier on was the cooperation between the countries, HELCOM work. That I think is fundamental. It is a joint water, and I think it's very important that we work together. And we've seen in our projects, and I'll come back to that, how we can, in some cases, I mean, it's difficult not to acknowledge that, of course, Sweden and Finland has really long border lines. For us, the Baltic Sea is really important, and maybe so we work a lot about it, but to some extent other countries might be bigger countries, have a lot more farmland and maybe more runoffs. So to some extent it might make sense also for us to do investments in other countries, and that might sometimes be difficult. But I'll take some examples here of more how we as NGOs and other parties working within the Baltic Sea, how we've started cooperate rather than working in our own silos and reinventing the wheels. I mean, we're here for the Baltic Sea, not for our own organizations. So we can actually really add a lot of value to the Baltic Sea by cooperating. So I thought I'll bring up this case, which was actually first founded. So it was a report that showed that when you're handling fertilizer, so fertilizer is of course one of the really big sources of these nutrients and the runoffs. So, and when fertilizer were being handled, they're typically shipped by boats. And when they're being then off and unloading, there are quite big leakages that happen. And the report showed that up to 16,000 tons of fertilizer was leaking into the sea as these fertilizer were being handled in the quayside. And the thing is that fertilizer is something that, of course, we use in nature. So it's typically good for nature to grow. So it's really hard to regulate the use and leakage, if you call it that, of fertilizer. So you're not breaking any laws when you're actually ending up spilling some of this into the water. But of course, as we understand from the specific case of the Baltic Sea, it is really the worst thing you can do. So while it's not regulated, there are solutions that exist to minimize this leakage. And this was kind of overlooked. Nobody had really seen this, and this report kind of revealed that. So 3 different organizations thought this was actually quite an interesting topic. We might do a lot of change here. And we then, instead of just running off and doing our own thing, we thought, let's work together on this and see how we can kind of, get more out of it by working together and sharing how we do this. And first thing was to separate it geographically. So one of the organizations was stronger in Finland and in Russia, whereas another organization was maybe stronger in Sweden and Poland. And the Baltic states, to some extent, were separate as well. And then also the approaches, whereas one organization was stronger maybe on the policy side, the other organizations were more the ones that were working towards companies and more the concrete actions, and they could then feed in the solution so that the policy suggestion was kind of the practical solution rather than a desktop idea. It was actually, once you've been out there, seeing what works and how is the right thing to solve this. And then we can, of course, then share learnings by working separately, but sharing learnings and seeing, what is a good solution here. So this was one case, and if we just flip side, I'll show it. So in the race for the Baltic case here, because we were one of those organizations, we started with a cooperation with the companies, and together with the companies, we managed to identify one of the big leakage points. And in this case, the leakage point that we identified was the gap that you typically have between a ship and the quayside. So since it's being offloaded and unloading across that gap, when you have leakages, it tend to spill in that little gap. And together with the companies, we developed this really, really low-tech solution where we put a tarpaulin, basically, so a prevention cover between the boat and the quayside. So super simple solution, but it wasn't in place. I remember the first time when we passed by to see if it was up and was being used, there was 3.5 tons of fertilizer lying in that tarpaulin, that prevention cover. So quite significant amount. And it should be remembered that this was a quite small boat, and it was just one occasion. And these are actually being, offloaded more or less, 24/7 around the Baltic Sea in various different ports. So one of those like really low-hanging fruits, a little bit coming back to Kai's comment on focusing on those. And then in addition, we together with Boston Consulting Group developed like best practices, and because this is just one of the things you could do. So we developed that, and we've spread that across the different ports around the Baltic Sea. And we also developed a movie for these kind of the actors working in the Baltic Sea. I don't think we have time to see this now, so we'll skip that, but that's something we can, of course, distribute to anybody interested, and it's also on the website. So that is one example where we, as organizations, worked, cooperated together, shared experiences, but also how we could, because this is a role that could be sometimes easier for an NGO to fill, because it might be difficult for Sweden to help out in a project in Lithuania, because there are regulations that you can't really do that always. So then the NGO can come in and actually work. So we did a lot of our work in Poland, for instance, because they have bigger ships and transportation in Poland, so we could have a bigger impact there. But we also worked in Denmark and in Sweden and Lithuania. So that's one example of how you can cooperate. I thought of another one where we cooperated in a little bit of a different starting point. So here, John Nurminen, and I think this was briefly mentioned by Anna-Maria as well, they started a project with the small-scale fishery in Finland, which turned out to be a really success story in Finland, where they developed kind of a new sustainable product that is both good for this small-scale fishery, very sustainably fished, but also actually managed to combat, to some extent, eutrophication. And so this was a great success story in Finland. And we said, why don't we kind of repeat this in other countries? If it works well in Sweden, in Finland, why don't we repeat this in other countries? So so John Nurminen then joined forces with other organizations and started kind of repeat this in Åland and Sweden with others. So another way, an example of cooperation. And I think this is something it is very important that we can work in that way and continue to cooperate. But it's not always as easy as it might seem, because people have, there is still a bit of a sense of competition, but I think we're slowly trying to change that and realizing that we're all actually working for the Baltic Sea. We have the same goal. It doesn't make any difference for us if it's us or John Nurminen or Baltic Sea Action Group or WWF or CCB that actually makes the difference. The important thing is actually the Baltic Sea. So the one that's most suitable should do it, and best of all, of course, we join forces and work together, because we'd all have different competencies. So this, I think, is these are two great examples that we've been able to be part of, and I think it's a very important thing going forward.
Looks delicious, that archipelago fish patties that are sold in Finland. Would like to try those. And if they also save the Baltic, it's even better. And we can eat that instead of meat every day. So that would help as well, I guess. So thanks a lot for that input. And maybe if someone has a link to the film that you mentioned, they could post it in the chat, either here on the Zoom chat or in the chat on the World Water Week website that are connected to this session. So we've now looked at both the situation in the Baltics and some of the potential solutions there might be, and both the political side and the cooperation between civil society organizations and different actors. But what can we do to enhance these actions and cooperations going forward? Because it's not enough, because we still have the huge challenges, and we are just below, maybe hopefully a little bit below the threshold when it comes to the nitrogen, and a little bit above when it comes to phosphorus. So there is a lot of things to be done still. So I would like to hear your comments on what is needed now for the future from your different perspectives. Maybe Kai, you want to start?
Well, yes, thanks a lot, and definitely as consumers, by the way, one quite easy and not probably that expensive way is to really choose that kind of food things. Even if you want to eat meat or egg, please choose that kind of egg which is actually produced in a way that the manure is turned into circular fertilizers, as they actually do already in certain large scale egg farms, and then this archipelago fish burgers or whatever, and these kind of things are very good in this. So they're actually, if 20% of the consumers would change habits in this kind of things, that would be a great difference. But yeah, the main challenge is how to basically go accelerate development towards circular economy around agriculture and food industry. That's basically, I think, that the main thing, that how we, as Anna-Mari was also showing like graphs about what they are doing also in foundation to accelerate, make it easier to invest into basically digestion of manure, and the important thing that not just digest into biogas, which actually Sweden has been doing already 20 years, much more than Finland, but also in Sweden in most cases this biogas industry doesn't turn the leftover into easily transportable circular fertilizers, which is the main thing, because otherwise you will leave the most of the phosphorus and nutrients to the nearby farms anyway, even if producing biogas from manure in between. So this is one very important thing, just to somehow like unblock the opposition from certain part of agricultural like subsidy organizations. And I understand that there is always, it's about priorities. If we put this kind of priority inside agricultural system, then it's they are afraid that it's lost from some other part. But this is something we need to do. So and in the end, even if I said that quite little has changed in 20 years if we compare to climate fight, but on the other hand, of course, things are going forward, and we've been able to diminish also pollution, and we have to accept that it takes decades before the sea actually gets healthier. But definitely somehow to really define the circular economy of agriculture and food industry. That's basically the main thing here.
Thank you very much. Peter, what do you say? What is the most important things now going forward?
Well, it depends on if you mean on the corporation side, or if you
from your perspective, what do you want?
There are many interesting things. I mean, I'll try to be brief, but I'll still kind of help to address some of the various things here. I think on the corporation side, one thing that I have found quite useful, there's been an initiative, because what we can see is that Finland and Sweden, as said, we're not perfect or better than anyone else, but of course this is a really big problem for us, and we've been working on it for a long time. So we have, but we're smaller countries, we have less agriculture, which is the big remaining thing. So being able to set off the same amount of money that we're using here, if we can use them at other places, we can actually have a lot more impact. And there's been this initiative called NEFCO, where some of the Nordic countries actually set off money that was able to be used in different countries. And I think that's something we should definitely continue with, because that has been had a lot of impact, and it's been part of. So for instance, St. Petersburg and that sort of thing, their money has been going to those places. I think that's a very good initiative on the more government side. I think on the corporate side, what we heard of before was quite interesting when you had nutrient schemes. So you kind of, if you did things that reduce nutrients, then you get compensated for that, of course, because I think we managed to do in other countries more impact in the entire country of Sweden just last year, and the only reason we were able to do that was because we were able to work in other countries. So I think the international
cooperation, it's
but
actually a comment also from the audience that they ask a question about how to increase cooperation about the HELCOM targets, for example, and so that's some input. Let's move on. So if you don't, did you have something short?
Well, I can. Okay, no, but let's move on. I should.
Joachim, what do you feel?
Well, looking at the thing from business point of view, when we really want to include businesses in this kind of a collaborative mode, business is based on supply. We supply something somebody demands, and please demand more of us. Demand more from us. Don't like as we at Caverion, and I know everybody, well, perhaps not everybody, but most of the companies are more than happy to provide the customers what they ask within the limitation the MPs of Finland, like Mikkonen or the else, then set the boundaries that we play within. So please demand of us more. Be in a way firm in your wants and desires. So if it's too wishy-washy that it would be nice to, it doesn't really go as far as it could. So we are more than happy to supply as long as there is a strict and a firm demand.
Also from the audience, a comment that there could be a development of science-based targets for water. So that's an interesting input, I think. Anna-Marie, what do you wish for?
I think we need. I wish for actually from the science and scientists methods and equipments that we could really work with the nutrient load that is already in the sea. We know, as Peter and Kai has mentioned, we know how we can deal with and how we can reduce the nutrient load that comes from land to sea, and we need to really push that work further. And Kai, I would add that yes, we have to do that at home Finland needs to really do the job, but we also need more political collaboration, both in HELCOM as well as outside, really to do joint forces and cooperation all around the countries on the eutrophication. There are still things to do, as mentioned. And the third thing is I would wish for is actually, and that's why I'm very happy that we are having this discussion today, is collaboration and more, like Joachim said, if people know about things and if you make suggestions and if you, like Peter said, if you kind of have trust and invite for collaboration. There are only very few times where we have, for example, experienced that somebody says no. Most people want to be taking part in something good, building the future. And that's why it's great that we are talking about the Baltic Sea on the Baltic Sea Day, which we launched 4 years ago as an international day to celebrate, to enjoy, to remember, to learn about our joint sea.
Yes, thanks a lot. And we got one more comment from the audience about the battery industry. We will not have time to discuss that, but I just want to mention that there might be risks connected to the battery industry, that there could be emissions of sulfuric acid, for example, which could then be reduced to sulfide, and that could cause problems in the future. So we'll also keep an eye on potential upcoming new challenges that might arise. But now we are getting closer to the end of this seminar, and it's the Baltic Sea Day. So I would like to ask all of you panelists, what will you do? Will you celebrate the Baltic Sea Day today at all? So who wants to start? Peter, will you celebrate the Baltic Sea Day?
Yes, I've actually started by taking a swim in the Baltic Sea. That was how my day started today. And this evening, we're going to celebrate in Berwaldhallen in Stockholm with a big classical concert and an exhibition. And I think we might even be joined by her Crown Princess of Sweden, Princess Victoria. So that's a nice celebration, I think.
Yeah, that's very nice. Joachim, will you celebrate the Baltic Sea Day in some way?
For sure, I'm planning on going paddling. I wasn't brave enough as Peter was that I would have started my day by taking a swim, but when I get home from work, I'm going to take my kayak and do a little evening paddling.
That's nice. Kai, will you celebrate?
Well, yes, I actually started the day by greeting my wife and kids with that happy Baltic Sea Day, and they will have the kids day jolla practice, jolla sailing practice. So maybe I also have to go a bit of paddling or with some other water sports in the evening, so that to notice this Baltic Sea Day and that way as well.
Sounds good. Anna-Marie, will you do some work maybe connected to the Baltic Sea Day?
Yes, but also obviously work with a smile. We are offering and having a great program together with the Helsinki Festival all day long. It's about food production, it's about eutrophication, it's about history and culture, it's about Baltic Sea identity, and there also obviously will be music and good food. So yes, absolutely, and I do hope that the weather will stay as good as it was promised to be, over 20 degrees, so that I could also go to a swim in the evening.
From my side, I have to make do with Lake Mälaren here. It's connected to the Baltic Sea though through Stockholm, so it's almost like the Baltic Sea but no salt. But maybe I will go for a swim here and think about the Baltic Sea. So we'll see. But thanks a lot everyone for this enlightening seminar. I hope the audience that you have learned something, and if you want to learn more, there is the John Nurminen Foundation website and also Race for the Baltic website, and you can also follow. I'm quite sure what Kaverion and the Finnish Parliament are doing on these issues. So keep you inspired and enthusiastic about the issues related to the Baltic, there is hope. And maybe in the future we can use the actions for the Baltic Sea as a model also for other parts of the world if we do this right. So is there anyone who wants to have like a very short comment in the end? Please, if you have something that you would like to say, Peter, did you have a
Well, I have so
comment?
much more I would love to say.
Yeah,
but I think there are many things that can be said. I don't know how much time we actually have left, but I think one thing is I am actually really positive. I think when you work in philanthropy, I mean, there's so many issues out there, and you can of course do a lot of good. This is actually one of the problems we can solve this. And as you saw from the graph, there is a gap remaining. And if we manage to close that gap, we will actually be able to kind of save the Baltic Sea for future generation. It won't be good by that time, but we'll actually get better all the time. So to some extent, I'm very positive, but it's important that we don't stop the work now. And I think there's one other thing that I'd love to mention. I said I can go on, but
we are running out of time, but
okay,
very shortly. Say it.
One really important thing is that there is this water framework directive. So within the European Union, there is a water framework directive that we were supposed to meet in 2015, then we had 2021 postponement, and we were able to postpone it till 2027, but we can't postpone it after that. After that, we'll get fined. And I guess that's why the civil servants say now it will be impossible, but that doesn't matter. We'll be fine otherwise. And it is not impossible. It's definitely not impossible. And I think this is something that needs to be raised, that this is something we've agreed upon. It's definitely something we can meet. And if we don't meet it now, which makes sense for other reasons as well, because we get more money out of a fresh working Baltic Sea than if it doesn't work and related to the money that it costs. Yeah. Then we'll be fine as well. So I think this is something that people don't know about, that it's actually commitment that we have, and it will solve the biggest kind of problem that we have in this region.
I think actually, I mean, I'm super inspired also always by these graphs. And I think one of the most inspiring thing was the graph, decreased emissions. And if you manage to continue that work, we will actually get below the threshold. So that's inspiring. Thanks a lot for that last comment. And I wish everyone a happy Baltic Sea Day and hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Keep
Bye.
going. Thanks. Bye.